The story kicks off with Kyle, a student at Buxton Academy High School, going through his usual morning routine before heading off to school. There, he stands in front of the crowd and delivers a speech about the value of looks and money, using his own good looks and wealth to bully those who don't fit the typical mold. While many in the audience applaud him, some remain silent, clearly not buying into his spiel. Kyle seems to be campaigning for Green Comedy president, touting his wealth, attractiveness, and famous parentage to win over voters. Amidst the crowd is Kendra, a girl with a face tattoo, who storms off in anger after Kyle's speech. Little does Kyle know, Kendra is actually a witch. Post-speech, Kyle steps outside only to find his posters vandalized and defaced. Kendra doesn't shy away from admitting her hand in it before making a swift exit. Soon after, Kyle encounters Lindy, a fellow student he suspects of being associated with Kendra. However, Lindy denies any connection to Kendra and emphasizes her desire to speak for herself, not be spoken for. They part ways after a handshake. There's a hint that Lindy might have feelings for Kyle, although they haven't really spoken in 3 years. Later that evening, Kyle engages in a mundane chat with his father, David, indicating their distant relationship and David's busy schedule. Despite being in the same room, Kyle texts his father about the election results, but David barely acknowledges him before leaving. Shortly after, their housemaid Zolo tries to strike up a conversation with Kyle, who rudely brushes her off. Surprisingly, Zolo doesn't take offense and walks away with a smile. The day after, Kyle clinches the election, nabbing the title of president, and the crowd erupts into applause. Afterwards, he approaches Kendra, sensing her discontent, so he extends an olive branch in the form of a VIP party pass. Kendra, somewhat reluctantly, decides to give him the benefit of the doubt and agrees to join the festivities. As dusk falls, Kyle preps for the soiree and heads out, clutching a white rose. At the venue, his eyes lock onto Lindy, hustling as a waitress. They exchange a few words, during which Kyle learns of Lindy's dream to visit Machu Picchu. She shares her plan to head straight home after her shift, skipping the main event. Amid snapping shots for the school paper, they delve into the significance of the white rose. In due time, Kendra makes her grand entrance, anticipating her rendezvous with Kyle. However, to her shock and dismay, Kyle publicly humiliates her, revealing his earlier kindness to be a facade. Kendra's anger boils over, and utilizing her witchcraft, she places a curse on him, triggering a sense of discomfort and dizziness. Overwhelmed, Kyle makes a hasty exit, abandoning the party midway. Upon returning home, he encounters Kendra on his balcony, who elucidates the details of her curse. She transforms him into a hideous, bald creature, granting him a year to find genuine love. The only escape from the spell lies in someone professing their love for him. Left reeling from his grotesque appearance, Kyle's horror deepens as he beholds his disfigured reflection. Later that night, his father, David, returns home to the shocking sight. Desperate for a remedy, David rushes Kyle to the doctor, expressing his son's preference for death over such a fate. Yet, the doctor offers no solution to their plight. David informs the doctor that he's ready to take a big chance. This statement rattles Kyle, who storms off, convinced his dad is risking more than just his own life. A few days later, David moves Kyle to a remote location away from the city, where he'll live solo. Meanwhile, the school spreads the word that Kyle is undergoing rehab. Zolo stays by Kyle's side during the initial days. In the empty house, Kyle roams around aimlessly, battling boredom. One day, a tutor named Will, hired by David, pays Kyle a visit. Initially resistant, Kyle softens when he realizes Will is blind. However, he uses the opportunity to vent about his father. Late one night, Kyle, sunk in melancholy, stares at his father's photo when Zolo enters. Surprisingly, Kyle engages in a pleasant conversation with her, asking about her family. Zolo shares her sadness about being away from her kids in Jamaica and advises Kyle to be patient, assuring him that David will visit. Kyle remains doubtful and leaves a voicemail instructing his father not to pretend to care. Feeling restless, Kyle takes his new motorcycle into town and ends up at a party, likely thrown by a friend. Inside, he encounters Kendra and tries to make amends, begging her to help him feel normal again. Disappointed by her response, he witnesses his best friend kissing his girlfriend, shattering him. In his despair, Lindy approaches Kyle, confiding in him about romantic troubles, unaware of his identity. Kyle empathizes with her. The next morning, he wakes up on the floor to find his blind tutor playing darts. They share a brief conversation, during which Kyle expresses disillusionment with his so-called friends. Later on, reminiscing about better times, he gazes at an old photo of himself with Lindy. Under the cloak of night, he ventures outside and positions himself near Lindy's house, peering in through her window in secret. This marks the beginning of his obsessive monitoring of Lindy, revealing a burgeoning attraction. Over dinner one day, Kyle ponders the idea of aiding his blind tutor in regaining his sight, although the tutor dismisses it as unattainable. In conversation, Kyle casually mentions going out with a girl the previous night. Zolo and Will, upon hearing this, share in his joy and celebrate by playing rooftop golf. Encouraged, Kyle pays another visit to Lindy, only to stumble upon a harrowing scene, two assailants holding Lindy's father at gunpoint. Reacting swiftly, Kyle intervenes, disarming one assailant and rescuing her father. However, the other thug shoves Lindy down a flight of stairs, rendering her unconscious. Kyle swiftly carries Lindy to safety. Moments later, a gunshot rings out. Returning to the scene, Kyle finds Lindy's father has shot one assailant, while the other flees after issuing threats. Seizing an opportunity, Kyle manipulates Lindy's father into agreeing to let Lindy stay with him for protection. In the subsequent encounter, Lindy arrives at Kyle's residence, visibly upset with her father for placing her in a stranger's care. Concealing his true identity, Kyle adopts the persona of Hunter and attempts to win Lindy over with lavish gifts. However, his gestures fall flat. Recognizing his misstep, Zolo advises him that Lindy cannot be won over with material possessions and suggests he get to know her on a personal level. Taking this advice to heart, Kyle approaches Lindy incognito, offering her the same sweets she enjoys. Drawing from his observations while stalking her, he appeals to her curiosity. Initially wary, Lindy questions her surroundings but is eventually reassured by Kyle's explanation, leading her to appreciate his gesture. Following this, Kyle finds himself increasingly drawn to Lindy and starts writing letters to her. Additionally, he decides to construct a greenhouse because he knows Lindy has a fondness for roses. From the next day onward, Kyle throws himself into building the greenhouse, keeping his face hidden from Lindy throughout the process. One evening, while sitting in the living room, he notices the markings on his right arm glowing with various colors. Shortly after, Lindy enters the room, sparking a conversation with Kyle. As they bond over translating Korean TV shows, Kyle eventually reveals his face, nervously asking Lindy if it's repulsive. Lindy's reassuring response brings Kyle immense joy, strengthening his affection for her. A few days later, Kyle finishes the greenhouse and invites Lindy to see it, impressing her with his effort. They then have their first tutor class surrounded by the blooming flowers. Before diving into their studies, Kyle treats Lindy to her favorite coffee. However, their class is interrupted when Will and Zolo leave them alone. Undeterred, they begin reading poetry together as the seasons change within the greenhouse. In the subsequent scene, Kyle pleads with Kendra for more time to break the curse, but she declines. However, she agrees to help Will regain his sight, with Zolo's condition being that he sees his children again if Kyle succeeds. Later, Kyle stumbles upon a picture of himself and Lindy in her room, catching him off guard. They engage in a conversation about Kyle, with Lindy expressing her admiration for him, unaware that she's speaking to her crush. Afterward, Kyle suggests a late-night stroll to the zoo, where they share intimate whispers and playful moments, deepening their connection. Kyle then opens up about his past while visiting a meaningful spot with Lindy, recounting memories of visiting the zoo with his father and his mother's sudden departure. Their night concludes with them sitting on the roof, awaiting the sunrise together. Lindy rests her head on Kyle's lap, drifting off to sleep, feeling a deep connection with him as if they've been friends for ages. Kyle gently carries her to bed, but his heart sinks when he spots a message on her laptop, revealing her plans to run off to Machu Picchu with another guy. Determined to change her mind, Kyle whisks her away to his dad's fancy mansion. As they journey, Lindy gets a text from her dad, urging her to come back since the troublemaker has been caught. They share some intimate moments at the mansion, and Lindy opens up about her past. Later, they stroll by the lake, moments away from a kiss when Lindy's phone interrupts with news of her dad's hospitalization. Rushing to the hospital, Lindy thanks Kyle for being a good friend, unknowingly hurting him deeply, as he hoped for more. On her way, Lindy reads the letters Kyle gave her, revealing his growing feelings for her. Despite her dad's recovery, Kyle remains distant, wounded by Lindy's earlier words. The day finally comes for Lindy to head off on her Machu Picchu adventure. Back at home, both Zolo and Will think it's a good idea for Kyle to go see her off. Taking their advice, Kyle heads to school and finds Lindy. Despite the stares from everyone around due to his unsettling appearance, Kyle remains unfazed. When Lindy spots him, she questions why he never called her back. Kyle admits he was scared she wouldn't return his feelings. Then, in front of others, he finally spills his emotions for her. In response, she pulls down his hoodie, plants a kiss on him, and wraps him in a hug. But she holds back from saying those 3 words, leaving the spell intact. However, Kyle doesn't push her and instead encourages her to enjoy her trip. Lindy starts to walk away, but soon she turns around and lets out those elusive words, "I love you." Kyle exits and catches his reflection, realizing he's back to his old self. Moments later, Lindy rushes back, seeking Hunter, only to find Kyle. She tries calling Hunter but is startled when Kyle's phone rings. It finally dawns on her that Kyle and Hunter are one and the same. It takes a moment for her to process it all, but eventually, she does, and they share a kiss. In the closing scene, Will's vision has returned, and Zola has received the documents enabling her to reunite with her children in Jamaica. Turn on alerts, like, and subscribe for more videos similar to this one. Thank you for watching.